right. Hello and welcome. Super pumped to be here today. You are listening to Honest to God on AM 1160, The Quest Atlanta. We got an all-veteran crew today, which is exciting. Every one of you has been on this show before, right? We got Michael, we got JJ, we got David, and we got Luke, and we should have a blast. They were going to be talking about authentic masculinity, which I've learned from past talks I've given and interviews that I've given. That is one of the quickest ways to create a flame war in the YouTube comments section, which is very exciting. And a big shout out to our international listeners. We were just talking about that beforehand. Yep. We got them phoning in from the UK, from
Australia,
Guam. No way, really?
We got some Guam listeners. Yeah,
but we own Guam. The U.S. does, so it's not international.
It's not technically international.
I don't mean that in a demeaning way, Guam. Like
I saw glad you're here. One from South Korea.
South Korea, nice.
Interesting. Yeah.
We don't own them.
And the North Korea ones we just don't know about because we want to keep them safe.
Yep. Can y'all imagine how many? I bet our listening population is at least 30% North Korean underground.
Right now. Definitely.
And this is how we get flagged.
So that's who listens to AM nowadays. So.
They do, seriously. I bet this stuff reaches all the way over there.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have no idea how radio works. I just know that if I talk into this microphone.
Did you know that North Korea has its own internet? Like they don't allow anyone in their country the access to the traditional internet. There's 5 different radio stations that they're allowed to listen to, about 20 different channels. And it's all propaganda.
Actually,
so we are talking about North Korea internet.
We are. That is the theme for today.
We're
is
calling
North Korean
audible.
internet.
No, you'll be surprised how this ties into pure masculinity. I promise. I'm
Got
authentic.
Authentic. Yeah. So I'm actually really excited because everybody's been here before, which means we just have one thing and we can get into it because I think this is going to be a pretty good discussion.
And I would like to shout out the person that suggested this topic. It was one Luke Glockner who gave us this suggestion.
Big shout out to Luke Glockner on YouTube. Was that on YouTube?
Yeah, it was on YouTube.
And if you've got anything that you would like us to discuss, or even a couple episodes ago, we had Miriam on, who we found out about through YouTube. If you're interested in being on the show, be sure to leave us a comment, send us a DM. What's that email again, Ben?
Email is youngadult@thequestatlanta.com.
Heck yeah. Check us out. Reach out. There's just one young adult, right? Not multiple young adults.
Yep, just a singular young adult.
There's one
it's
young
just
adult.
me, actually.
Are you the
Ben
email?
is the young adult.
I can get into the email.
When I get an email from young adult, is that coming from you?
It's coming from Janice usually.
Okay.
All right.
Whoa. Yeah.
She's
young adult.
She's a young adult. Yeah. All right, guys. So let's go through really quick. Give us your name. Give us one thing about you that we don't know, and then we'll get started. And make sure you check out our Instagram, where by this point we will have a video of show notes. Benny singing "Thank You for Being a Friend" from the Golden Girls. We are pumped for that. Starting with you, Luke.
Alrighty. My name is Luke Paget, and fun fact about me: last time I was on here, I said I was a Star Wars fanatic, and this kind of plays off of that. I own 3 replica lightsabers,
like the legit kinds,
like the legitimate kinds.
That's pretty cool.
Yes.
I dig it. What about how's your Lego Star Wars game? How's that?
Lego Star Wars game.
Yeah, you got any Millennium Falcon full sized?
That's more or less my brothers. My younger brothers collect the Star Wars sets. So
there was a time when I looking back, I'm ashamed of this, but my son was into Legos, but not as into Legos as he should have been, because I love me some Legos. Where I was like, "Hey man, you want to run to Walmart and maybe get a Lego set to do?" And he's like, "I want to play outside. Like I want to do authentic, beautiful, good things." I'm like, "Yeah, or
a Lego.
Go by Walmart and pick up that new Millennium Falcon." So I'm embarrassed.
Let's just
by
spend
that.
money.
Yeah,
we'll talk about how that's not
I would have been
masculine.
into that. The biggest Lego Star Wars set is I used to have the Millennium Falcon, and it just kind of fell apart. So it just got too pricey, you know?
No, it did. Yeah,
hyperdrive.
Yeah. David.
Yeah.
David or David? You prefer David?
It's David.
There's no little.
Nope.
All right, I thought
I'm not that French.
Right,
so David. Yeah, David Boudreau. And last time I mentioned how I work on helicopters, and now even better, I am now sling load inspector certified.
Sweet.
As of today.
That sounds super cool. I don't know what it means, but it sounds amazing.
I can hook things up to helicopters.
That's cool. That's really cool.
It's
I dig it.
Cool.
Hey, I'm JJ, and last time I broke a bone, I didn't realize it, and I tried to walk it off for the next 15 minutes.
What bone did you break?
It's just my toe. But,
just your toe. Okay.
But I mean, I was walking on it, so.
It off.
All right. You can walk. Yeah, you can walk up a broken toe.
Quick question for Dave. What's your call name?
What?
What's your call name?
Make
Call
up
sign.
a cool
Call
one.
sign.
Let's do it right
Everyone.
now.
I know one other pilot, like fighter pilot or fighter
Oh,
pilot in
fighter
helicopters,
pilot,
and
helicopter
he
thing?
said that they all call name. Call signs.
Show Note Benny says Top Gun.
Oof. So right now, the appropriate one is Frenchie.
Frenchie.
They say that they're all in the Air Force or is it the Navy? They're like complimentary, but in the Navy they're
Army,
complimentary.
it's
In the
just
Army, they're
insulting.
exactly.
Yeah, it's just straight insults. We love it.
It's not Tinder because of the Tinder hoodie that you're
That's
wearing right
not
now?
the.
Which we don't endorse here on
You know,
Honest.
So
I'd rather
fun
go with
though.
Frenchie than baguette.
This was a retreat
went-
that I ran for high schoolers.
We went to
Again.
the Forsyth County Fair
over
like a couple of weeks ago. Was it
My-
last week
My
actually?
pan au
Yeah,
chocolat.
Yeah, so last week we went to the Forsyth County Fairgrounds, and I commented like, "Hey, why do you have the like Tinder logo on your sweatshirt?" And not just me, but 3 other people thought the exact same thing.
Man.
But it's actually like the fire
So-
of Christ. Is that
so,
what
so
we're
no,
doing?
like you want to see the back? You want to see the back? All right, all right.
Braveheart.
Yeah, it's a
All right, I
Braveheart
dig it.
quote. All right, it was a retreat we ran.
William
A
Wallace
retreat
definitely
that
would not have had a Tinder account though.
No, he would not have. And
Way too much.
I
of a
did
man.
not design the
For
video.
hookup
I
apps,
just
yeah.
designed. Actually, I designed the talk on masculinity for high schoolers.
That's right. We're bringing in all the experts
we're
today.
bringing it back.
It's
We're bringing
exciting.
it back.
Then Michael, give us one thing.
My one thing is that I know over 300 varieties of roses, like the flower.
Oh wow! There's
You-
not just
you
one type.
know Up here, you said you got.
Yeah, my first business was a high-end rose import business. So
Oh, wow.
I'm
So, what's your favorite type of rose?
the favorite type
I
of
do the
rose.
interview in here, David.
Oh, sorry.
But I mean, I guess I'm curious too.
I'm-
now.
Mine is
so
one. Mine is
curious.
one that's called a peach campanella, and it's like ruffles up super big, and it's you wouldn't even know that it's a rose, but it's pretty sweet.
Sounds amazing.
I like.
I basically
red
did it.
ones,
Yeah, red ones.
but I do
Basically
that.
did so when I got married, I could have really good rose, and I just shut down the business as soon as we got married.
That's cool. That's what I do. All right, that's awesome, guys. So this is a big topic, right? Authentic masculinity is a big topic, and it's something that we talk about a lot. I wasn't joking earlier when I said it's the quickest way to start a flame war on YouTube.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of passion that is tied up into this. And that's why part of the reason why I'm excited to talk about this is it is something that invokes a lot of opinions in people. And I'll go on the record, and this might not be super politically incorrect, or super politically correct, but on saying that there is a real battle being waged against masculinity in general in our world right now, in Western society in general. And I think that we compensate and we respond to that. We being people who are more traditionally minded in some ways. I'm trying not to make it a political thing. I don't want to say conservative, but I mean conservative in like an actual sense of trying to conserve our understanding of masculinity. I think we overcompensate a lot in a way that is really detrimental, right, to our society. And so I feel like there's a problem here, and our solution to the problem is also a problem. I just want to get into what that means. Can anybody define masculinity? That's a really hard question.
It's definitely one of the tougher questions that I've had to, or at least tried to answer. So like there isn't like a set answer. Like the best way to describe masculinity, I'd have to just say Jesus Christ. Like that was
Sure.
masculinity. Like I can't think of any better one. Or just Saint Joseph of all things. Like he provided for his family. He did his job. He protected the Holy Family. And he raised Jesus to the best of his ability, even though he was the only sinful man in that household.
Yeah, no, that's killer. Yeah, imagine growing up in that household when your wife
I often talk with my dad,
and
like,
son
talking
are
about like
literally perfect.
what that would be like at the dinner table, like blessing the food. It was like, thank you, well, you, and I was just like, blessed, well, my wife, please pray for me.
You just know Mary was saying, look, someone made a mistake here.
Yeah,
And Joseph just hangs his head immediately.
I also like thinking about some of the dad jokes
I'm
that he would have
gonna
come up
excuse myself
with, like just Saint Joseph dad jokes, like just like him coming home from work is like, hey Jesus, your mom told me she invited you to that wedding at Cana, and she told me all you did there was wine.
Oh, that is a very good Joseph
That's a
dad
good
joke.
one.
Yeah. All right, but no, you're right, obviously, right? But I'm going to give Luke a little bit of I'm going to give you a little bit of ribbing on that because there's a cop out answer, right? Obviously, Jesus is the perfect role model. Yeah, I mean 100%. But why? Can we define it? I don't have a good definition. This isn't something where I'm looking
Very
around.
broad spectrum.
I mean, I can define it in a way that is sort of ethereal, right? Sort of like a masculinity is that which men are called to, but it still doesn't define it itself.
I mean, there's so many things I think of, but I think the base level you got to start with is just doing what you need to do.
Right.
Just really, for me, manhood has been like really duty oriented. It's like I know that there's things I need to do for the friends in my life, the people in my life, and so much more than that obviously, but it's like the starting point for me is do what you need to do.
And maybe that's a good way to come at it, is not try to define it, but rather come up with attributes of it. Right. So other than duty, because I think that's a big one, duty and responsibility. Also something that I think is very feminine, right, as well. But what differentiates the two? What are attributes that are exclusively masculine? David, what you think? You just gave a talk on this. You're the expert.
I know. Yeah. Well, talk was in 2019.
Relatively just.
Relatively just. Yeah.
To the existence of the universe. Yeah.
When you put it that way.
So what is it? Do you think you can?
You can't boil it down. You really can't. But in a phrase, authentic masculinity is a man pursuing his true calling to holiness and to order through his maleness. I guess through that initial call of Adam, right? As the man.
Oh,
right?
I like that. I like the idea of examining Adam, a very imperfect man, as opposed to Jesus Christ, right? A perfect man, to sort of look at how Adam was ordered. We know that he did not, we know that he fell, right? But no, that's really good. I mean, I always think of words like provider and protector and defender and sort of these sort of classic masculine attributes that makes people upset when you say that, when you say it's the man's role to do these certain things. I think we're caught up in a society that thinks equality equals sameness, particularly amongst the sexes, right? When that could not be further from the truth. And I think a lot of our issues right now, there's just that great documentary, What is a Woman? And now we're sort of having the what is a man discussion. But I think a lot of our issues come from an inability to realize that when we're saying men and women are equal, and they are in dignity, right? But they're not the same.
And where I think a good way to examine it is, what has masculinity been for largely up through the last, even up till today. Now it's changing, and that the role of the virtuous man, and with Jesus and as example, is the one who does what may not be expected, but for what's right. So it's like they do what is needed for that truth. And so the examples that are brought to, and women can do that, but what defined masculinity in the past and even up to this day was in tribes, it was the man's responsibility to lead that family unit and decide what sacrifice they need to make to survive. Even if we look at the various advancements in our culture, fortunately and unfortunately, because men have had such an authoritative role in our society, they oftentimes will need to be the ones that step up and say, "Hey, this is wrong." And they, the one who is necessarily the one who hasn't had that lead role before, they wouldn't always have the power to go out and make that change. And they can, but it's the job for the men to see, hey, what I'm seeing in front of me is true, and so I need to stand up for that. I need to sacrifice for that. Not to say that women can't do that, but historically it's needed to be a man who's been able to take that lead role because they've been in the position to do so.
No, absolutely. I think that's great. JJ.
That makes a lot of sense. And you kind of touched on leadership, and that just made me think of, I think even from both a position of traditional Catholic virtue, but also from a more modern idea of what a man is supposed to be. I think something that they kind of have in common is that for women, a woman's dignity comes from within herself. Just by virtue of being a woman,
Sure.
she has like a grace and dignity in that. But I think for men, it always comes down to their dignity, and their virtue comes from how they treat other people.
That which they do outward, right?
Exactly. It's about being a father, being a leader.
I've quoted this before on the show, but C.S. Lewis has this great quote, and he's addressing masturbation and pornography, right? And I'm happy to get into that because I think that's a huge scourge that is worth talking about. But what he's saying is that the issue with masturbation in particular is that it orients a man back towards himself in a way that we're naturally born into. We're naturally born selfish, right? I mean, and for biological evolutionary reasons, right? That makes sense. Babies should be selfish, right? Babies need to be selfish, right? They're going to cry and scream until they get the things they want because they don't have any other way to do it. And they're ordered towards being provided for, right? But as a baby becomes a child and then a man, right? The measure of a man is him moving out from himself for the good of others, right? And in doing so, it's for the good of himself. But that masculinity is tied in what you are doing outside. I talk to a lot of young men, high school and college guys, and a lot of times they'll view religion in a feminine way, right? Because the mother was more religious. And I think there's this big movement to feminize a lot of Christianity that exists in our culture right now. And they'll be talking about, well, I'm trying to pray and I'm trying to do this. And one thing that I always say, going back to this, going out of yourself is, yeah, but go do something. Go do charitable works. Go do a thing because you're more oriented to that moving out of yourself for the sake of others in ways that women are, but not to the same degree. And we have to acknowledge the difference.
Yeah, definitely a big aspect. Something that I would define a man as like a male aspect is leadership. It's been mentioned several times there already in this conversation. But like obviously a majority of the world leaders are male, and men normally take a leadership role when it comes to the family. It's not. It's
No.
saying that,
I want to say something real quick on that. It's not men take a leadership role. It's that ontologically, by their nature, they are called to be heads of households,
Exactly.
right? And if they are not the head of household, right? Or I'm sorry, if they don't behave like the head of the household, if they're not the leaders of their family, it doesn't make them not the leader. It just makes their family leaderless or with a really, really bad leader. When mom is taking the role as head of the household, it's disordered and she's still not the head of the household because by his nature, ontologically, the father is that head. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, it's fine.
It's like Lord of the
Thank you.
Rings.
Yeah, thank you for correcting me.
It's like
yeah.
Lord of the Rings, like the Rightful King.
Sure, it's exactly like Lord of the Rings.
Actually.
Yeah, speaking of Lord of the Rings, like when I was younger, I watched Lord of the Rings at a young age. Whenever my dad got mad, it was kind of like when Gandalf got mad and like the room got dark and like the lights went dim. It kind of felt like that sometimes. But like he was authoritative. I recognized him from a very young age as the leader of our family. Like my mom, she calls a lot of the shots, but normally my dad is the one who makes all the big decisions for our family. Like obviously he doesn't make them by himself. There's obviously the counsel of the wife and the thought of for the children.
Yeah, it's
and
not
how it
stepping on your mother's back while
exactly.
making these decisions. Yeah.
And so like so I believe that men have to be leaders, like they have to be the heads of their families. And it's not that some women can't be leaders, because obviously there are some fantastic leaders like in our history. There's Joan of Arc, there's obviously Mary the Mother, there's even Queen Isabella and
nice. Queen Isabella shout out. This episode of Honest to God is brought to you by the Reconquista from Spain to Central America. Way to go, 15th century Spaniards. We appreciate you.
I'd love to see it.
Yeah, and so I think a big thing that comes along with like leadership or being the head of the family is risk. Like a lot of the risk that is taken upon society is upon men. It kind of also goes to show like why men normally initiate a relationship with like a girl that they like or with a young woman, so that the risk of being rejected is squarely on the shoulders of men. Like,
we talked about that recently on an episode. I got some pushback from some of the ladies, but I think that men are called to do that, and it's because it is an act of bravery, right?
Exactly.
To say I can be shot down, but you're worth it. So I'm gonna put myself out there.
I think that we should be careful, especially when we say like
oh, men have been mostly leaders in, businesses, companies, things like that, because, well, that's because it's always been that way, and there's been all this societal structure that have done that. But the reason I say all these, you can come up with every single definition of what a man can be, but whatever definition we have is inaccurate, not whole, and it's disordered if it's not tied to our relationship with Christ. Because
100%.
the only place that makes sense is, for example, we can have, all the women in the world to be CEOs and probably be incredible. We can probably have, women who are sacrificing themselves for their children, all these things there. They can go and protect their children there, but without knowing that what is the point of our society, what's that domestic unit? It's the family, and it's the domestic church.
Right.
And what's the role that God has defined for us as men in that domestic church? And it's to be the worldly priest. And so to be masculine is to be head of the church, in that we're in relationship with Christ and we're leading them in that way. And so it's not that these things that we're describing in the description, which it's all great because that's just where we went, but it's because God has assigned the role, and that's what is masculine. Like, it could be something different, like you said, but when it is that way, it's not what God has given. If God is true, God equals truth, which goes back to virtuous masculinity. Well, the definition, what's virtue? Virtue is truth. Truth is inherently God. So God equals truth. So how do you be authentically masculine? Jesus Christ, exactly what you said.
And,
but
it's ordered.
And it's to align yourself. But the only reason that any of our definitions are accurate is because we believe that there is a definitive truth, and the only in that that truth that God gave us that as how it is. Any other Catholic Christian argument comes back to, does God exist? And, is it our God?
Yeah, it's from the presupposition, right? It's like understanding these things, understanding that these are ideals that are presupposed, that we understand that God is real. I am not God, and I'm a man called to be like him, because I am made in his image and likeness, right? I'm made to be an alter Christus, right? In that same sense, right? I was thinking about it, right? Mary gave her fiat, right? Let it be done to me. Joseph, I forget the word for it, but he gave his, like, I will go, I will do. Let it be done to me, yes, but and she has some beautiful words. Joseph, let me just do.
I will do.
He doesn't speak. Right? There's
not once in the gospel.
There is only action from Joseph, right? He takes his family and he leaves.
Oh, that's good.
He
Okay,
builds
yeah,
his,
absolutely.
Right? He finds Christ in the temple, right? So he does these things as a leader. He doesn't comment on it. He doesn't make some charade about it. But yeah, he leads from action.
So I want to talk about something we were talking about off air a few minutes ago, and it's this idea that that being a man involves all these, I keep using the word accoutrements, right? But all these things, and you do these things and you like these things. And I can speak for myself and say, I wear a lot of flannel. I own a lot of guns. I drive a pickup truck. I like to hunt. I spend a lot of time outside. I farm. I kill all the animals that we eat, right? I do all of these things that are sort of traditionally manly man things. And none of those things are what makes me a man,
It's
right?
correlation, not causation.
Exactly. The manliest men I know, actually, the guys who I really respect as fathers and husbands, right? And as virtuous men that I want to be like, don't do those things. And if I'm being honest about it, and I'm really looking at myself, I think the reason that I started doing all of those things, which I do like, I really enjoy these things now, but was growing up, I was trying to figure out what it meant to be a man. And so I started grabbing onto all of this stuff and saying, I like this and I like that. And as I've matured, right, St. Paul, when I became a man, I put away childish things, right? I started to realize some of those things that weren't actually making me masculine. An example I use a lot is, and I'm not attacking people who watch football or are super big into sports. I really like sports. But I was really, really, really invested in sports. I was really invested in University of Notre Dame football. I was really invested in the Braves. And this was an all-encompassing thing in an unhealthy way to me, because I was doing a thing that men like to do. And then I did it, and it did speak to a part of me that likes that. It likes that danger and that competition and all of these things. And I realized at one point that, this is actually emasculine because of how I'm reacting to it. Yeah.
100%. I mean, I was thinking about that a lot, and I think it's just all these things that we think of as traditionally masculine have been turned into a commodity of manliness.
Consumerism is consumer-based masculinity.
Exactly.
Well, I think what's good too is masculinity can be definitive, but the manifestations of that can and should be relative.
Right.
Exactly.
And so
like
it's just made it up. Great, quote it.
Good. Yeah.
Let's do it.
But
Put on a shirt.
but
It's like
I
a
think
flag.
that hopefully, like I'm similar to you. I if you couldn't tell by the size of my neck, I played sports all my life. But I'm the last. Everyone who actually knows me, they know that if someone starts talking about watching sports with me, I am the least interested person in the world because I'd rather be the one going out and doing it.
Right.
But and there's actually a part disorder of how averse I am to that. So there's a little acceptance I have to do in my own heart. But the whole idea of, hey, for you, the sports can be masculine, that can be healthy. But for me, it's kind of like the sin and the intention.
Right.
Right. So like everyone, like a lot of sins, it's the intention behind it. So you know what? If you saw me walking down the hallway in heels, you could think one of two things, right? You can think what a lot of the world thinks, but then if you know the story of, hey, I'm actually walking down the hallway in heels because I've got a little girl who doesn't have a mother because she passed away, and I want to make sure that she feels comfortable when she grows into it.
Right.
That could be the most masculine thing you
Right.
could ever think
That's
of,
That's
right?
a man right
Dang.
there. That's a man.
Yeah, that's very good.
Yeah.
One thing that I want to make sure we get into while we're on here is the topic of pornography. Right. That is something that is a scourge on not just masculinity, but is a particular scourge on the men in our world. And at all stages. Right. I don't know what the average age is now, 9 or something,
It's
that you're
8.
first 8 that you're
Yeah.
first
Yeah.
exposed to it. But it is a scourge, and it is something that I said this the other day, and I feel like I sort of scandalized someone, but it's true. I have a son, he's 10, and I do not believe that it is possible for me to prevent him from ever being exposed to pornography in this world that we live in, right? Yeah. My goal is not to prevent him from ever being exposed. I mean, I would love for that to happen, but realistically, that's not something that I think I can aspire to. My goal is to form him as well as I can, so when he is exposed, he's able to reject and not have it get its hooks in there. That's something that I struggled with when I was a younger man in a big way. And we were talking about hot tubs beforehand, and I wanted to link that back in. It was not until I was in college and I was at a party, house party, hanging out. I've told this story before, and there was a friend of mine who came around the house. He kicked all the girls out because he said, we're not going to have girls here. We're not going to, at night, we're drinking. It's not a good idea. And he told me to come get in the hot tub with him. And I sat in a hot tub and I smoked like 2 packs of Camel filters and drank all the alcohol in the whole house while having a really awesome, in-depth conversation with this guy and a group of some other good, strong men who were the first men in my life that I looked at and I said, I want to be like you. Like, you're the kind of guy that I want to be like. And they talked about all the deep stuff, and they sort of pulled the scales from my eyes. Not only that there are guys who are trying to live like as authentic, virtuous men, but also everybody is dealing with and having these same experiences and these same struggles that I am. And while I can be ashamed of it, I don't need to wallow and hide in that shame. You said you had a similar experience, Michael.
Yeah, I've got the hot tub experience, which I can want to talk about. It was actually a great Bible study, but there's another story that came to mind about the pornography piece that I know that we're all talking it from a religious sense, but I find sometimes it's also helpful to look at the reality even from like a secular sense of why it's not there.
100%. Yeah.
When there's a story when I lived in San Francisco, and if you ever live there, it's harder to find housing than it is to find a job. Right. And so you kind of go and you do an interview with roommates, and you bring beer to try to impress them, and then you kind of go through this awkward process, and it's like a job interview. I remember going to one, and there was one guy in the group. He was really cool. He did like cyber. He worked for like one of the 3-letter agencies doing cyber spy stuff to catch online predators.
Sure.
And so he was telling me about all that, and it was really cool. And then there was another guy there who was trying to get the room, and conversation moved on, and he kind of said, and then he went up and said, "Oh yeah," and he started talking about like, porn or these different, things, just to kind of like pump the chest, and everyone kind of go along with it. And me at this point, I was pretty convicted in my faith, but we had just talked about this one guy, and I asked him, the the 3-letter agency guy, and he had described that like some crazy high percentage of the women who are in porn are basically like sex slaves.
Sex slavery, yeah.
And and so we had already talked about that. And so when he was kind of this other guy's thumping his chest a few minutes later, I had to ask him. I said, "So if you're masturbating to this, and you now heard that this is all sex slavery, how can you reconcile that you're the reason why sex slavery is happening?"
Right.
And his response was, "You just can't think about that." How can you, and hopefully that's not people's responses around the world, but hopefully you're genuine, just man, religious or not, can say, "Hey, you wouldn't want to encourage sex slavery, right?" No. Well, it comes from a demand.
Right.
And draw that connection.
Well, to blow that out a little bit, talking about masculinity in general, and talking about, so I teach a theology of the body class I've talked about on this show before. And in the class, I spend about 2/3 of every unit we're doing looking at it from a totally secular standpoint. I purposefully don't bring up God, don't bring up sin, don't bring up virtue. I don't bring any of that into it. There's no morality component for the first couple of weeks of every unit. And whether it's pornography or it's contraception or it's fatherless homes, whatever it is, right? We read all these stats. It's kind of, I think the kids get irritated with it because it's mountains of stats. We have a day where we read through all of these actresses, porn actresses' deaths, how old they were when they died, and how they died. Right?
I've heard the mortality rate is crazy high.
And they're all drug overdoses and suicides and murders. I mean, it's horrible. And we look at the impact on marriages and the rates of, it's like 80% or something. I mean, don't quote me on that, but of all marriages from a meeting of divorce lawyers, an annual meeting, include pornography in the documents, right? And so, like masculinity, right? Truth, like we were saying earlier, is true whether you believe it or not. Nobody cares if you can be an atheist, you don't have to believe in God at all, but still your masculinity and the duties that come from that have serious impacts on you if you don't abide by it. And I think that's worth digging into.
I mean, yeah. It's funny, like you said, really the most compelling arguments against porn and masturbation is honestly the secular ones.
Yes.
The fact that it will melt your eyes out, or whatever they're telling the kids these days, is not the most compelling argument. There's so much more, and I talk with my friends about this a lot, and I don't think I can remember the last time I've started with, as you know, God doesn't want you to do this.
Right.
And the kind of my starting point, I've actually got it tattooed. Camera's not flipped, is it? Like they can read that?
Yeah, they can read that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, love kills lust, but lust kills love. I just 100% believe that the two are mutually exclusive.
So getting into men and sexuality, I was having this conversation with a group of boys recently. As a married man, I can't lust after my wife, right?
Yes.
I'm called to chastity as a married man. I can have sex. I can have sex whenever I want. I mean, within reason. But I'm still called to respect her and her dignity.
Yeah.
I'm called to these virtues. It's not like as soon as you get married, all of a sudden,
No.
you don't have to worry about any of those rules anymore, man. Don't worry about that. Yeah. Don't worry about chastity. Don't worry about these virtues.
People will say, like, they think that they're, like, being clever or something, and they'll say, hey, I lust after my wife. And I'm like,
sorry.
you don't. I'm
Sorry
like,
for both of you.
either I'm
That's a
sorry for
horrible
you,
relationship.
or you don't know what that means.
I think that's often the case, especially when you have well-formed men who will say, I'm lusting after my wife or whatever. Because I've heard guys say that too. And you always want to stop and say, no, you're not. That's I
Exactly.
hope you're not. I'm really sorry if you are. That's something you need to work on.
Yeah.
But yeah, sexual desire, which is a good thing,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Rightly ordered, a very positive thing that's put on our hearts for a really good purpose, right? that's not lust. Sexual desire is not.
No. See, yeah, and it's very interesting. You talk about that because, again, yes, there is the extreme of we have people that are getting exposed at such young ages and on horrible addictions, whether it's masturbation and pornography or whatever you have it. At the same time, I always find that there's also the circles of people within the faith or people that are trying to get away from their addictions, which is good, right? They go to the other extreme, like you said.
Oh, sure.
Like,
They
right?
demonize it.
It's like
Sex is bad.
Sex is bad.
dirty.
It's just
Yeah.
horrible.
Which is
No,
a
it's like
lie.
no. It's one of the most beautiful things in the world, right? Your relationship, your passions, your physical attractions. It's one of the most beautiful things in the world. It's been misordered,
Right.
right? As in all sin, it's been misordered.
Well, we live in this really interesting culture where it seems like the two options we have in regards to our sexuality are either throw it all to the wind and go out and sleep with everybody and misuse your body and misuse others, or have this Victorian prudishness that a lot of kids, especially kids whose parents are uncomfortable having the conversations with them because they're awkward or whatever, right? That makes sex seem like it's something that is dirty and is disordered in and of itself, or like a necessary evil. I mean, you even see in the writings of some of these early some of the early Protestants, and I'm not ascribing this to Protestants today necessarily, but that will say, no, it's a necessary evil and you shouldn't do this thing and it's bad. When no, it's literally the opposite of that.
Crazy.
It's this beautiful, great thing that needs to be ordered rightly, like all things.
And that's sorry, go ahead.
No, you go.
So, and that's what I feel like is so enticing about pornography. Like, obviously, it's like it's the most addictive thing on the planet, but it's enticing because there is an element of good to it.
Yeah,
it is
totally.
The human body, male and female. When they're together, it is a beautiful, holy thing if it is in the right circumstance. That's the whole point of consummation after marriage. Like, there's a spiritual aspect and there's a physical aspect to it.
Sure.
It has to have both. Otherwise, you get a one-sided coin, which is useless.
Right.
You want to hear a great tie back? Lord of the Rings.
Good.
So-
I was hoping we could bring porn into the Lord of the Rings analogy.
For real. Honestly, the orcs. What are the orcs, right?
Elves.
What are the orcs? They're
Yeah.
elves. They're just mantled and ugly and horrid, right?
Okay, that was actually a really good analogy. Okay.
Yeah,
Keep going.
right.
Roll
But
it
they're
out.
the
Yeah.
most beautiful things in the world, right? The base of that sin was one of the most beautiful things. Something that's supposed to last forever. Something that's supposed to defend, to be wonderful, and now it's fighting against itself.
Right.
Right.
That's great.
You know,
Lust, orcs. Yeah.
I recently just read Out of the Silent Planet by C.S. Lewis. Great book. And one thing that they talk about in it is this idea of in the language of the planet that they're on, they don't use like broken or like evil. They use the word bent,
Yeah. Oh, that's
like
interesting.
out
Yeah.
of shape. Like
Yeah.
it's a utter disorder. And I think that's something that like that porn and masturbation really does, because it's taking away that spiritual aspect. So it's bending the beauty of it,
Right.
and at the same time bending the user of that.
Right.
So it's almost demasculating
Right.
every time you watch and every time you participate.
It's not almost. It is.
right.
Oh,
Yeah,
it's
it is
so
so emasculating.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's also the what you can't deny is it's the sin isn't the act. The sin is that you are not treating that other as the brother or sister of Christ that
Right.
they are, and that like humans are set aside. And so you can't, it is literally impossible for you to look at something like that in porn and say, I am not using that. You say, oh, I'm not using it. Well, you are, because you're the only one who's benefiting. And even if it's your spouse or whoever it may be, if you're doing it for yourself, that is selfish.
Right.
And so you want to think of yourself like, well, if you're in a good relationship, do you want to be doing something that's selfish? Like, do you think a good relationship is selfish? No, it's not. God doesn't want us to be selfish. They want to give of ourselves and fill the other people up.
It ties back to that
Yeah.
C.S. Lewis analogy
Yeah.
about moving outwards of yourself. Nice.
no.
I like how we're kind of getting a good definition of masculinity through this. Right.
Right?
Okay, that's good.
Right? I wanted to mention there is a talk that it's recorded. You can go online if you're on YouTube. Switch to the next YouTube page after this.
Yeah, but keep this one open and let
Keep it
run in the
open
background.
while
Yeah.
finish the
Yeah.
video.
And then watch the next one.
24/7.
Open
But,
your
uh,
tab.
but-
Once
search
you've
up-
watched all of the Honest to Gods, then go over
Yeah,
there. Right.
Father
Uh-huh.
Sean
Yep.
Kilcawley gave a talk at Christendom College on masculinity and masturbation and pornography. It's probably one of like my favorites, of course. But he goes through how, we disorder how we are loved and how to love, right? The order of, as a child, we are to learn how to be loved, right? And as we grow up in adolescence, we need to learn how to be loved. And from there, how to love with somebody. So that friendship, that relationship, that order, right? And then how to love for somebody, how to love without wanting in return,
Right.
How to give without wanting in return.
Sure.
So you could substitute how to be given something, how to give with somebody, and how to give without expecting anything in return. When you get into pornography, you're trying to jump to level 3 without knowing. It's like you want that, you want to be able to give without expecting nothing in return. But you're asking someone to give everything.
Well, yeah, you're
without
the inverse
wanting,
of 3. You're taking
inversing,
without, yeah.
You're inversing.
So I have a question for maybe help out the listeners of the podcast. For those out there, it's one thing to say, okay, great, I get it, but like nothing's gonna. Maybe it's the Catholic woman, but good chance in the world out there, some of the women will say that they don't care until they realize that they do. How do you think? What can men do that say, yeah, I want that, but it doesn't seem worth it? Like what can men, either that person who wants to help
what is
the
that
other
what
men,
we want? Holy marriage and
an ordered love life.
for those who are like, it seems like you in the room, what can you do to help those around you to show them, hey, this is worth it? And then what can those people who want to believe that it's worth it convince themselves that it is?
I think deep down, most people know that it's worth it. If I ever talk to any of my non-Catholic or non-Christian friends, if I briefly mention like, oh man, I hate porn or like masturbation sucks or anything like that, their first instinct is usually not to like beat me over the head and say, dude, what are you talking about?
Right.
They are always interested. There's a very keen interest there. And I think it's the trap that the devil's laid here is that he's taken what is an opportunity to love and told us that it's anything but that. And what's really important is just letting everyone know that this is meant, that we're made for love. This is how we're made for love, and that it's an opportunity to love. The first thing I had to realize in fighting this is, for the longest time, I thought that the second that I felt any sort of like sexual stirrings,
Right.
dang it, I failed. I did it again. But the first step was realizing, no, this is an opportunity I have to love someone right here and right now. And this is a signal to me that God has placed in me to direct me towards that.
And bringing, I'm sorry to bring it back to Lord of the Rings. That brings it back to a Gandalf quote.
All
that
of Lord of the Rings is a metaphor for
even the desire
masculinity.
to do. Yeah, Lord of the Rings is masculinity. That is your definition. Anyways, Gandalf even says that even the desire to do good leads to great evil, and that's so everyone. It's something that is written on the human soul from the very moment of conception. It is the desire to seek and pursue the good, the true, and the beautiful.
Right, absolutely.
Like when someone says they went to a really great restaurant, what is your first reaction? Hey, what restaurant was that?
Right.
Like, where is it at?
Let
I
me
want
seek the
to
good.
share in what this
Let me see
goodness
this
is. I want to
treasure
see.
that you have.
Exactly.
Deep fried good.
People
Chick-fil-A.
want. They want. It's written on the soul, and unfortunately nowadays, what's good, true, and beautiful has been skewed and just terribly bent out of shape, and so people pursue things that they think are good but are actually harmful to themselves or to others or both.
Well,
And
it's not possible for us to do that which is not the perceived good. I had a great philosophy class and we talked about that, right? It is right now, David could not do something that he does not perceive as the greatest good, right? You might do something stupid, but then that's to prove me wrong, which you perceive as the greatest good in the moment, right? And so the devil does such a good job of taking these things that are that are good, right, or at least perceived goods, and written on our heart, right? We are called towards Christ, and that lie of the devil is twisting those things and turning them against our nature. I talked earlier about how I quit watching sports for a while because I realized that was a big issue in my life, right? And what I realized, similar to pornography, I'm not putting professional sports at all anywhere near pornography. But what I realized is, like with pornography, your body is longing, right? Your heart is longing for connection and intimacy, right? And sexual desire. And you're watching other people do that. And that is a disordered, right? A disordered expression of that inward good, right? I was realizing that instead of doing good things, instead of doing virtuous things, I was watching other people do virtuous things, right? And so I was numbing this very masculine desire to get out and do good things and heroic things by watching movies constantly with cool action heroes in it and watching people do like highlight reels of the MLB. And that was dumb. Once again, not playing on the same level as pornography, but I realized that was something broken in my life. Yeah.
Yeah. So you were talking about like, what can we do to influence another that doesn't believe the same things or see the same way, to understand like, okay, it is good to not indulge in these sinful acts and not even have that temptation of lust. Honestly, yeah, it's going to be by your example, by your actions, and by the way you live. And a lot of that is just, it's a slow burn, but it's one that's worth it, right? Because if you're living, like if we here understand what is good and how to get to it, right? And we're working and pursuing, we fall a little bit, we have some backtracks, but we're honestly pushing for it,
right?
Like pushing for what is good, true, and beautiful. Others will take note. The first weekend that I showed up, at my wonderful aviation unit, right? One of the questions, right? I'm sitting there doing a repair. One of the questions was like, we're making funny jokes and off the hand comments, and one of them was about, having sex,
right.
And one of them was like, Boudreaux, you're like, yeah, you know what we're talking about. I'm like, no. I don't. And he just like looked at me. He's like, what do you mean? I was like, no, that's for marriage, man. And he's like, whoa, he's like, whatever. And then a couple weeks later, I went to go work, just one-on-one with this sergeant that had cracked that joke. And he's like, dude, I'm really sorry. I did not mean to do that. Like,
right.
I didn't mean to push that boundary. And he said, I respect that so much more than
right.
if you came in here as a PT stud or as a guy with like 100s on every test. And I was like, whoa, like what? Because he had been, he had just a horrible experience, and just so many things were taken from him just from a young age that he thought, again, perceived good, right? Was
right.
it perceived good?
Right.
And he said, I will never be able to love my wife the way that you will be able to love yours.
Yeah.
Right? And he's like, I want to love her better. I want to do better, but I can't.
Well, and I want to make sure that I say for anybody who's listening out there that there is not, because you have a rocky past, because you made bad decisions, it doesn't mean you're broken. It doesn't mean you're incapable of love at all. I know you weren't saying that, but I just want to clarify.
No,
but I will say, a quote that I use a lot is that God forgives us, but nature does not, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I know for a fact, because of bad decisions I've made and bad habits and bad mindsets, right? From pornography to using girls and things like that from my high school and some college experience, I have it a lot harder, and it's much more difficult for me to be that man and that father and that husband that I so desperately want to be.
Yeah, and it's like you can be there.
You absolutely can. You absolutely can do it.
There's just a burden that you carry, and it's painful to see.
I think what some of you guys were saying, and what I would encourage out there who are listening, is if you've fortunately been one of those people who said, I want this for the men around me in my life, I'd say don't give those other men a but. Meaning, he's abstinent, but he doesn't go on any dates. Or he's abstinent, but he doesn't have any fun. Yes, he's abstinent, but no one likes him. It's like, no, seek excellence. Seek excellence in the best way possible, so that when other men see it, then they want that. Like I've got probably one of my best friends. I joke around. I say he looks like Brad Pitt, but he's one of the guys. We would go out, and it would just be known that when he went out, he would take someone home. He just the joke and the glory that most guys want. That, oh my gosh, I want to go out and take someone home. Well, he could, and he did, and his numbers are in the hundreds. But when I talk with him, he after doing that for a decade, he's like, you know what, Michael, like it's not even what it's all cracked up to be. Right. But the nice thing was, like, I'd be out there talking to the same people. I get a number and go on a date afterwards. But it's slightly different. And then we'll look at our lives now, and it's like I'm married and I have kind of what he wants, and I want to give it to him so much,
Right.
but he doesn't have it. So whether you're young or not, like be excellent and don't give them a butt to the degree that you can, because they're seeing the media in the world like, oh, that's what I want. But if they got one of their friends to say, no, actually, that's what I want, then that's going to convince them.
Well, and people are so. I've always been amazed at how receptive people are to truth. Like when you say it, and when you can say it boldly, right? And once again, not in your face, but just like not be ashamed, not make an excuse, not, it's like you were saying, these guys are talking about sex, and your response is like, no, it's for marriage. I'm not into that. And it's not like, let me explain, let me make apologies for it or anything. It's like, no, it's true. And I'm not saying I hate you. I'm not saying I'm looking down on you because of that. And sure, we're judging actions and not souls, right? But what you're doing is you're becoming so attractive just by virtue of the truth that you're possessing and willing to say out loud.
Yeah, the world is what tells for people to think that they want lust, the world has to tell them to do it. But for people to start realizing that maybe they want something more, that they want love, I don't have to tell them. If I just live that, people will see it in me and seek it out. All I have to do is mention it, and people are interested automatically.
Well, and that's the beauty of, to tie it back to something we said earlier in the show, that is the beauty of, I lost my thought totally and completely.
Well, I can pick up.
That out. Thank you. Yeah.
So pulling back to something else about hot tubs and beauty.
Nice. Hoping to end on hot tub.
Had
Itching
a
for a hot tub right
and
now.
If you haven't heard John Henry gave the little brief description of his hot tub experience, but he detailed it more in other podcasts. So I encourage you to go check those out. But my experience was when I was in college. I was a year ahead than some of the guys, but like I said, I grew up doing sports, and there were a couple guys who played football with me and also wrestled, and they were like really athletic guys. One of them was actually an international Abercrombie model before there was the whole thing.
Wow.
Like when Abercrombie was the thing,
Yeah.
like he was the guy who they'd flew him around the world for store openings. He'd take his shirt off and people take pictures with him.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, all of his older sister's friends loved his younger brother. But so he came, and went to college, went to University of Illinois. And I had one of my buddies and pulled in some of my other friends that had just joined campus, but they're all a bunch of like really athletic, I'd say objectively good looking, but also just cool. Like you wouldn't tag them as any given thing. And we had a good Bible study. And one day, one friend, and this was before the campuses started getting super bougie, but there was like one apartment complex where they had a hot tub, and one of our friends did live in the bougie. So we're like, how about we go to the hot tub? Let's check out the nice place. And so we all went in the hot tub, especially with International Abercrombie model here. And the other guys are looking decent. And we're all in there. There's like this group of girls that were just like in the hot tub. And we all walk in, and like to their surprise, we didn't talk to any of them.
Right.
Because we then all like pull out our Bibles in the hot tub.
Nice.
And they thought at first that we were just like, and they just said, "Are you guys like, you have Bibles?" We're like, "Yeah,
Yeah,
like,
we do.
Are you guys joking?" We're like, "No, we're in a Bible study right now." And they're like, "Oh, okay." And they left on their own. We didn't have to kick them out.
Right.
But
That's wild. That's an awesome.
It was
They didn't
probably
want
one
to
of my
join the
favorite
Bible study?
favorite Bible studies.
I thought that's how it was going to end. And then
right
they
there.
came over, and now they're all
our
joining the
wives.
Carmelite order.
They're all Carmelite nuns. Like,
All right, y'all, this is awesome. I could do this all night. Unfortunately, we are well over time, and we don't even have time for popsicle sticks or cards right now.
sweet.
So we're going to sign off. This is a conversation that I would like to keep going. I would love to have another masculinity talk. I took so many notes on so many things I wanted to talk about. There's just a lot.
We'll have to have a part 2 at some point.
We will have a part 2.
Episode
Yeah.
1784B.
Yep.
Exactly.
You
We're going to
get
get
on
there.
the dot.
All right. Well, thank you for listening, ladies and gentlemen. This was great, guys. Thanks for being here. You were listening to AM 1160, The Quest, Atlanta's Catholic Radio. This is Honest to God. Producer Ben.
Signing off.
Yes, sir.